Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you see her behavior. Most men are blind to the most dangerous kind of love. Not the loud kind. Not the obvious kind. The silent kind. The kind where a woman feels everything, but says almost nothing. She comes close, then suddenly pulls away. She's warm with you, then turns cold. One moment she looks at you like you mean everything. The next moment she acts like you mean nothing. And if you misunderstand these signals, you might lose the woman who is quietly ready to give you everything. Because the truth is this: some of the strongest signs that a woman is deeply in love with you can look exactly like rejection. So if you've ever been confused by her mixed signals, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll recognize the exact moments when her heart is screaming your name, even while her lips stay silent. 1. She tests your emotional strength. When a woman begins to fall for you, something subtle starts to change in the way she behaves. She doesn't become softer immediately. She becomes more attentive. Because when emotions grow deeper, the risk grows deeper too. At first, you may simply notice small tensions between the two of you. She disagrees with you more than usual. She teases you. Sometimes she challenges what you say. Another day she may delay replying to your messages. Or she suddenly becomes slightly distant. To many men, this looks confusing. But psychologically, something very natural is happening. The human mind always scans for safety when emotional attachment begins to form. Especially in women. Because emotional investment creates vulnerability. Psychologists often describe this as a subconscious evaluation phase, the moment when attraction turns into something more serious. And the brain begins asking a quiet question. Is this person safe to trust with my emotions? That's why her behavior may start testing your stability. She might joke in a slightly provocative way to see how fragile your ego is. She might cancel plans once to see whether you become desperate for attention. She might disagree with you just to observe how you handle conflict. Not because she wants to control you, but because emotional reactions reveal more truth than words ever can. Anyone can act confident when everything feels comfortable. But the moment uncertainty appears, real character shows itself. This is something philosophers understood long before modern psychology confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A woman who is quietly observing you is looking for exactly that kind of strength. Not loud dominance, but emotional control. Consider a simple real-life situation. A man sends a message to a woman he likes. She replies hours later instead of immediately. An insecure man begins to overthink. He sends another message. Then another. He asks if something is wrong. He tries to explain himself. And without realizing it, he reveals something important. His emotional stability depends on her response. But a calm man reacts differently. He notices the delay, but he doesn't panic. He continues his day. He focuses on his work, his purpose, his life. Because his identity is not dependent on someone else's attention. And strangely enough, that calmness changes everything. The woman notices it. Not consciously at first. But something inside her relaxes. Because emotional stability feels safe. Research in relationship psychology often points to the same pattern. People feel most secure around partners who display consistent emotional regulation under uncertainty. In simple terms, calmness builds trust. A similar principle appears in leadership. Steve Jobs once said, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." The same is true in relationships. In the moment, her behavior may feel confusing. But later, you realize those moments were revealing something important. She wasn't trying to create chaos. She was trying to understand your character. And this is where many men make a mistake. They take these moments personally. They argue. They try to prove themselves. They demand clarity. But the more reactive a man becomes, the more fragile he appears. Because confidence that needs constant validation is not confidence. It is dependency wearing a mask. A grounded man responds differently. He doesn't try to dominate the situation. He doesn't try to win every interaction. He simply remains stable, calm in his tone, clear in his boundaries, and unaffected by small emotional fluctuations. Over time, that consistency sends a message stronger than any words. It says, "This man is not controlled by his emotions." And when a woman begins to feel that level of stability, something inside her changes. Her tests slowly disappear. Her energy softens. Her guard lowers. Because she no longer needs to evaluate your strength. She has already seen it. And the quiet truth behind all of this is simple. A woman rarely tests the man she doesn't care about. She tests the man who has the potential to matter. 2. Hidden jealousy begins to appear. When a woman begins to fall for you, another emotion quietly enters the picture. Jealousy. Not the loud kind. Not dramatic accusations or emotional scenes. But something quieter. Something almost invisible. You may simply notice small changes. She becomes more attentive when another woman is around you. She asks casual questions about someone you mentioned. Or she grows slightly quieter when your attention moves elsewhere. At first glance, it may look like nothing. But psychologically, jealousy often appears at the exact moment emotional attachment begins to deepen. Because the human mind reacts strongly to the possibility of losing something it values. In relationship psychology, jealousy is often described as an emotional alarm system. It activates when the brain perceives a threat to an important connection. Not necessarily a real threat. Sometimes just a possibility. That's why a woman who is secretly in love rarely says directly, "I'm jealous." Instead, she observes. She listens more carefully. She pays attention to details she ignored before. Who you talk to. Who you smile at. Where your attention goes. Because attention is emotional currency. When someone cares about you deeply, they begin to notice where that currency is spent. Carl Jung once wrote something very interesting about human emotions. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Jealousy often works the same way. It reveals where emotional investment exists. A woman who feels nothing for you rarely notices your interactions with others. But a woman who values you becomes sensitive to those moments. And the way she expresses that sensitivity is rarely direct. Imagine a simple situation. You mention another woman casually in conversation. Maybe a coworker. Maybe a friend. She smiles and says something neutral like, "Oh, she sounds nice." The words are calm. But her tone changes slightly. Her attention sharpens. She listens more carefully. Not because she wants to control you. But because emotionally, something inside her is asking, "Where do I stand in his world?" This is something many men misunderstand. They assume jealousy is irrational. Or they dismiss it as insecurity. But in many cases, jealousy simply reflects emotional investment. You rarely fear losing something that has no value to you. Even history shows how deeply this emotion is connected to attachment. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "Jealousy is the fear of comparison." And comparison only matters when someone feels emotionally involved. But there is a very important difference between healthy jealousy and destructive jealousy. Healthy jealousy is quiet, observant. It asks questions internally. Destructive jealousy tries to control, to accuse, to manipulate. A woman who truly respects herself rarely expresses jealousy in dramatic ways. Instead, she becomes more aware, more attentive, more thoughtful about how you behave around others. She watches how you treat people, how easily your attention shifts, how you speak about other women. Because these details tell her something important about your character. And this is where many men make a mistake. Some men intentionally try to make women jealous. They flirt with others to provoke a reaction. They believe jealousy increases attraction. And sometimes, temporarily, it does. But it also damages something deeper. Trust. Psychologists often explain that relationships built on emotional security last longer than those built on emotional instability. Jealousy may create excitement. But stability creates loyalty. A man who understands this doesn't use jealousy as a tool. He uses clarity, consistency, respect. Consider another simple real-world example. A man enters a room full of people. He greets everyone politely. He treats other women with basic respect. But his attention naturally returns to the woman he values. Not through dramatic gestures, but through quiet consistency. Eye contact, presence, small moments of attention. Those signals matter more than grand declarations. Because they create emotional certainty. And certainty calms jealousy. Over time, something interesting happens. The woman who once observed quietly begins to relax. Her body language softens. Her tone becomes warmer. Because she no longer needs to question where she stands. And this is the quiet truth many men miss. Jealousy is rarely about another woman. It is about uncertainty. When uncertainty disappears, jealousy fades naturally. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." Emotional security creates that same calmness in relationships. When a woman feels secure in your presence, her mind no longer scans for threats. Instead, it begins to trust. And trust is the soil where deeper love grows. So when you notice small signs of jealousy, don't mock them. Don't feed them. Understand what they reveal. They often mean something simple. You have become emotionally important. And importance always carries risk. But the man who responds with calm leadership removes that risk. And when uncertainty disappears, something powerful replaces it. Peace. Free. She remembers the smallest details about you. When a woman begins to fall deeply for you, something subtle happens inside her mind. She starts remembering things. Not just the obvious things. Not just your appearance, or the way you talk. She begins remembering the details. The small things you said once, and forgot about. The story you casually mentioned about your childhood. The way you take your coffee. The music you said you listen to when you're driving alone at night. At first, it might surprise you. Weeks later she brings up something you mentioned briefly in conversation. And you wonder how she even remembered it. But psychologically, memory is never random. The human brain remembers what it considers emotionally significant. Neuroscience shows that emotional attachment strengthens memory formation. In simple terms, the more someone matters to us, the more carefully our mind stores information about them. That's why a woman who is only entertained by you remembers the highlights. Your jokes. Your confidence. The fun moments. But a woman who is emotionally invested remembers the quiet details. The moments when you weren't trying to impress her. Because those moments reveal who you really are. Carl Jung once wrote something that explains this beautifully. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. Real emotional attachment is not about control. It is about attention. Deep attention. And attention creates memory. Think about a simple real-life situation. You once mentioned that you dislike crowded places. Maybe it was just a casual sentence in a conversation. Months later, she suggests a quiet restaurant instead of a busy one. She doesn't even mention why. She simply remembers. Or maybe you once said that certain music helps you relax after a stressful day. Later, she sends you a song. Not randomly. But because she remembered what you said. Small gestures like these are not accidents. They're emotional signals. They show that you occupy space in her mind even when you are not physically present. Because when someone becomes emotionally important, the brain begins building a mental map of that person. Your habits. Your reactions. Your preferences. Your values. She starts noticing the way your voice sounds when you're tired. The way your tone changes when something bothers you. She notices when you're quieter than usual. Often before you even say anything. And this level of attention reveals something deeper than attraction. It reveals emotional investment. Consider a moment many men have experienced. A woman suddenly reminds you of something you said months ago. You barely remember saying it. But she remembers the exact words. Because to her, that moment carried emotional weight. And emotional weight creates memory. The writer Maya Angelou once said something that applies beautifully to relationships. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. That is the real reason she remembers you. Not just your words, but the emotional atmosphere you create. How she feels when she's around you. Whether your presence feels calm, stable, grounded. Because those emotional impressions stay longer than anything else. This is why some people become unforgettable. Not because they were perfect. Not because they were the most attractive. But because they created an emotional experience that stayed in someone's mind. And when a woman begins remembering the smallest details about you, something important is happening. You are no longer just someone she talks to. You have become part of her inner world. That's why a wise man treats this kind of attention carefully. Because emotional investment is not a small thing. It means someone is giving you space inside their thoughts, inside their memory, inside their emotional life. And that space should never be taken lightly. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." In relationships, the same principle applies. When someone is paying attention to who you are, the best response is simple. Be consistent. Be honest. Be the same person in your actions that you appear to be in your words. Because the deeper someone remembers you, the deeper your presence becomes in their life. And the truth most men discover too late is this. Being desired is powerful. But being remembered. 4. Your absence begins to affect her. When a woman begins to love you deeply, something subtle changes in her inner world. Your presence stops being just another part of her day. It becomes part of her emotional rhythm. Your messages, your voice, your attention. They quietly become familiar signals in her mind. And the human mind grows attached to familiarity. Psychologists often describe this as emotional conditioning. When someone repeatedly associates calm, comfort, or happiness with a person, the brain begins to expect that presence. Over time, your energy becomes part of her emotional balance. So when you disappear, even for a short time, something inside her notices. You might not see it immediately. Because she rarely says it directly. Instead, you notice small shifts. She becomes slightly quieter. Her tone becomes a little colder. Sometimes she responds with a short message like, "Oh, you're alive." On the surface, it sounds like sarcasm. But underneath, something deeper is happening. Your absence created a disturbance in her emotional routine. The human brain reacts strongly to interruptions in patterns it has grown used to. Neuroscience calls this expectation violation. When something that normally appears suddenly disappears, the mind begins searching for answers. Did something change? Did I do something wrong? Did his attention move somewhere else? This is why distance often creates reflection. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, "The heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of." Emotions often react long before logic explains them. A woman who has begun to attach emotionally may not even realize why your absence affects her. She only feels the difference. Imagine a simple real-life situation. A man and a woman talk regularly. Their conversations become part of their routine. Nothing dramatic. Just consistency. Then suddenly the man disappears for 2 or 3 days without explanation. When he returns, she responds differently. Maybe she sounds slightly irritated. Maybe she acts distant. Many men misunderstand this moment. They assume she is being dramatic or difficult. But emotionally, something else happened. During that silence, her mind filled the gap with questions. Uncertainty always amplifies emotion. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This applies to relationships as well. Your absence itself is not the problem. But unexplained absence creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is what disturbs emotional attachment. Because when someone begins to matter to us, we naturally look for signals of stability. This is why emotional consistency is so powerful. Not constant attention, but predictable presence. A mature man understands this difference. He does not disappear to test someone's feelings. He does not create emotional chaos just to feel wanted. Some men enjoy the feeling of being missed. They disappear and return dramatically. They believe it increases attraction. Sometimes it does. But what it also creates is anxiety. And anxiety cannot sustain long-term love. The entrepreneur Naval Ravikant once said something simple but profound. A calm mind brings inner strength and self-confidence. Calm presence in relationships works the same way. When a man is emotionally consistent, the woman around him begins to relax. She no longer needs to question where she stands. She no longer needs to interpret silence. Because clarity replaces uncertainty. Consider another everyday moment. A man becomes busy with work for a few days. But instead of disappearing completely, he sends a simple message. Busy week. I'll call you later. No drama. No long explanation. Just clarity. That small moment of communication prevents the mind from creating unnecessary stories. And stories are where emotional misunderstandings grow. Because when someone matters to us, silence rarely feels neutral. Silence invites imagination. And imagination often creates fear. But a man who moves through life with quiet consistency creates something much stronger than excitement. He creates trust. Over time, that trust becomes emotional stability. And emotional stability is rare. That's why it becomes deeply attractive. When a woman realizes that your presence is steady, not unpredictable, something inside her shifts. Her reactions soften. Her sarcasm fades. Her energy becomes warmer again. Because her mind no longer feels the need to protect itself. And this is the quiet truth many people miss. Being missed is not real power. Being trusted is. When a woman's emotional world begins to include you, your presence carries weight. And a wise man treats that weight carefully. Because the day your absence no longer affects her is usually the day she has learned to live without you. Or meaningful. 5. She opens up, and then suddenly pulls away. One of the most confusing moments in a growing connection happens when a woman opens up to you. And then suddenly becomes distant. At first, everything feels warm. She shares something personal. Maybe a story from her past. Maybe a fear she rarely talks about. Maybe something vulnerable about her life. For a moment, you feel closer than ever. Then, almost unexpectedly, something changes. The next day she becomes quieter. Her messages become shorter. She seems more distant than before. To many men, this looks like mixed signals. But psychologically, this moment often means something deeper. When someone reveals vulnerability, the brain immediately becomes aware of the risk that comes with it. Emotional openness creates exposure. And exposure naturally activates self-protection. In psychology, this is often called a vulnerability hangover. The moment after emotional openness when a person becomes aware of how much they revealed. The mind begins asking questions. Did I say too much? Did I show too much emotion? Did I give him too much access to my feelings? This reaction is especially common in people who have been hurt before. Because past experiences teach the mind to protect itself. So when she opens up and then pulls back, she is often not running from you. She is trying to regain emotional balance. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you will never have." Love makes people imagine possibilities. And sometimes those possibilities feel overwhelming. Imagine a real-life moment many people recognize. A woman spends an evening talking deeply with someone she trusts. The conversation becomes personal. She shares things she rarely tells others. In that moment, she feels connected. But later, alone, she begins thinking about it. She replays the conversation in her mind. She wonders whether she exposed too much. So the next time she sees him, she becomes more reserved. Not because the connection disappeared, but because her mind is trying to restore control. Many men misinterpret this moment. They assume she lost interest. So they react emotionally. They chase. They ask questions. They demand explanations. Why are you acting different? Did I do something wrong? Ironically, That reaction often creates the exact distance they were afraid of. Because emotional pressure makes vulnerability feel unsafe. A calm man reacts differently. He understands that emotional closeness sometimes needs space to settle. Instead of chasing reassurance, he remains grounded. He keeps his tone calm. His behavior consistent. Because stability communicates something powerful without saying a word. It says, "I am not here to take advantage of your vulnerability." And when someone feels that safety, something interesting happens. They return. Not because they were forced to, but because the environment feels safe enough to open again. History offers many reflections about this quiet tension between vulnerability and strength. Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, some are strong at the broken places." Many people carry invisible emotional scars. So when they begin trusting someone again, caution naturally appears. The moment she opens up and pulls back often means something important. She is processing her own emotions. She is deciding whether this connection is safe to continue. And this is where emotional maturity matters. A man who reacts with pressure increases fear. A man who reacts with calmness builds trust. Over time, that trust allows her to lower her guard again. Because emotional safety is not created through promises. It is created through behavior. Through consistency. Through patience. And through the quiet confidence of someone who does not panic when emotions become real. Marcus Aurelius once wrote something that reflects this perfectly. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. In relationships, that wisdom means understanding another person's fear without becoming controlled by it. So when a woman opens her heart and then steps back for a moment, the worst thing you can do is chase her fear. The best thing you can do is remain steady. Because the right woman is rarely running away forever. She is simply stepping back long enough to see whether you are someone she can truly trust. And if your presence remains calm and consistent, she will come back. Not because she was convinced, but because she finally feels safe enough to stay. When a woman is quietly falling in love with you, the signs are rarely loud. They appear in small moments. The way she tests your strength. The way her jealousy hides behind calm words. The way she remembers things you forgot saying. The way your absence changes her mood. The way she opens her heart, then steps back in fear. None of these moments are random. They are signals. Signals that her heart is slowly deciding whether you are safe to trust. Because love, real love, is not just attraction. It is risk. It is vulnerability. And it is the quiet hope that the person standing in front of you will not misuse that trust. That is why the strongest men don't chase reactions. They create stability. They remain calm when emotions become complicated. They remain steady when situations become unclear. Because emotional discipline is what makes a woman feel safe. And safety is where love grows deeper. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "True strength is the ability to remain calm in the face of uncertainty." In relationships, that strength changes everything. Because a woman may admire many men in her life, but she never forgets the one who made her feel safe in a chaotic world. And in the end, that is the quiet power every man should aim for. Not to be desired by everyone, but to be trusted by the one who truly matters. Final line. A woman doesn't test the man she doesn't care about. She tests the man she's afraid of losing. If this video helped you see relationships more clearly, subscribe to Silent Stoic, where every day we learn how to become calmer, stronger, and harder to shake. And tell me in the comments, have you ever realized too late that a woman's silence meant something deeper?